Okay, thanks for having me. So I just want to start off by introducing a little bit. The project is called Understanding Islam Through a Virtual World, and I collaborated with Joshua S. Fout on this project. It's one of many projects that we do to look at cultural relations, particularly co-creation of culture in Europe and North America. And for this project, we traveled to major static. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm reading the chat stream too. Sorry about that. Let me know in chat if you guys can't hear me, okay? We traveled to 4 continents across the physical world to interview Muslims and people who are non-Muslim who are interested in learning more about Islam. And then we studied the virtual world Second Life, which many of you may or may not be familiar with. It's a three-dimensional virtual world. I think 18 million people have registered, although that doesn't necessarily mean they use the world frequently. You can create a user-created space in which, for example, one of the people we interviewed is a 21-year-old Muslim woman from United Arab Emirates who built a mosque in Second Life and has hundreds of people who attend it. So I'm just going to start reading my slides to you. Just wanted to introduce the project and let you know what it is. So the opening quote: "The subject matter is not that collection of solid, static objects extended in space, but the life that is lived in the scene that it composes. And so reality is not that external scene, but the life that is lived in it. Reality is things as they are." We look at virtually as real people in a space, conducting relations with one another. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go to the next slide here, but the button I'm hitting is actually rotating the slide instead of going to the next slide. So Mark, can you jump in and let me know? Wait, let me see if that works. Okay.
You got it.
You got it? Okay. The most advanced technology has always been used for war, but only a fraction of the budget and will are invested in government as a peacekeeping force. That is a mistake. This is not a cartoon. This is the cover of the graphic novel that we created. We also created a set of policy recommendations and a short video that demonstrates, and you can go to dancingproductions.com on the projects tab, and Understanding Islam Through Virtual Worlds is one of the projects. This slide is interesting because some people took exception with the fact that this image was used because they thought it was too sexy, which was interesting to us because we didn't think it was sexy at all. This is a woman from Doha, Qatar, which is where we started the project in the physical world at the U.S. Islamic World Forum. And this is an event in Second Life with a Muslim cleric and several members of the United States military asking questions of each other. And the graphic worked for it. That's why we used it. As the global economy and culture shift in what I call the imagination age, which is really a combination of technology and creativity, government has a real opportunity to become a peacekeeping force. This chance should be taken seriously. I look at technology as a prism that we hold up to the bright beam of imagination, not something that takes place separately than us in devices. We're looking now at a real shift in perception toward mixed reality. And this image here was taken of a woman who was protesting violence in the Gaza Strip. And I conducted dozens of interviews over the course of days with people all around the world and how they felt about violence in that region. This is a Johari window. I think it's the best model to describe the shift afforded by virtual worlds. It includes 4 quadrants: how I see myself accurately, how I see myself inaccurately, how others see me accurately, and how others see me inaccurately. And participation in the digital culture is really shaking up all these quadrants and giving people the opportunity to really participate meaningfully in the physical world and at the same time to within the digital culture. And we've seen a lot of that in the presentations that have been given here today. So this is a Johari window. And this is the woman again from the image from the cover. And as community organizing skills expand through connective technology and imagination, new ideas about identity and community are forming as new forms of cultural exploration take root. Again, these are images during the rise of the conflict in Gaza in December 2008. A protest took place in Second Life. I asked the person behind this avatar why he'd set fire to himself, and he said it was burning anger for escalating conflict on both sides, which is really interesting because in the virtual world there is no opportunity for any sort of physical intimidation whatsoever, so people can express themselves and not fear that they're going to be hurt or hurt others. And this is a woman who is kicking a man out of her space. So it's important to note in Second Life and in other virtual worlds, environments can be created for the purpose of dialogue in voice or text, private or group chat, again, without any threat of violence or even physical intimidation. And conversations can be moderated through muting or banning speakers, which we see here. These images are from virtual ancient Mesopotamia, which is a global project by the Federation of American Scientists. They use archaeological data to construct three-dimensional models of the ancient history of present-day Iraq, which is where writing was invented. And this is really important to note because there are a lot of companies and businesses and business enterprise groups that are doing incredibly sophisticated work in environments like Second Life. For example, Northrop Grumman. They are replicating machines, for example, that a Cutlass robot, which takes bombs apart, disarms bombs, I guess is the proper way to say. And so there's a lot of work going on globally, and people perceive these spaces as cartoonish, but in fact, there's a lot of sophisticated work, and I say this, it might seem off topic, but I say this because it's important to realize that the media narrative has been very misguided on these spaces because they're cartoonish, but they should be taken very, very seriously. And go to the next slide here. People from all systems of belief are collaborating on cultural and economic shifts in borderless digital communities. This is no way limited to Islam. They are inhabiting one another's ideas, and understanding this intelligence is a major asset to a government that wishes to act as a peacekeeping force, with peace not being the absence of conflict, of course. I'm just going to address a quick question that I see in the chat stream. Do I find that communities markedly more vocal and outward with opinions in the virtual world? Absolutely, for obvious reasons, which is not to say that you won't find outspoken Muslim women in the physical world. You certainly will, and we did. But absolutely, the absence of fear of physical intimidation is a major asset. At the same time, the Abrahamic faiths are being explored in full force in virtual worlds. It's very important to note that new thoughts on spirituality are also being explored. For example, is it disrespectful to wear digital shoes in a virtual mosque? You're really tracking in germs and dirt at that point, but the fact of the matter is that these traditions are rooted in psychological and physical and spiritual components, and studying correlations in a virtual space lets you take a new perspective on that dimension of how people interact, which is very valuable. This is a time of great metamorphosis globally, and it's extremely helpful to understand this dynamic because you can build things together. In addition, feature of religion and spirituality and provocative gatherings that include people from all over the world in real time. Keep in mind, right now we're in WebEx, but none of you can see me. I can't see any of you. In this space, you can see the characters people create to, represent themselves and at the same time share mixed media like we're doing here. So individuals are becoming the leaders of new global movements, and it's obviously in the government's best interest to understand this dynamic, since upwards of 600 million people globally are considered to be participants in some form of a virtual world, and growing all the time. This is something that really interested me and goes back to the question about women being more outspoken. People are so determined to communicate that even in the absence of an Arabic script in Second Life, they create new ways to express themselves. As you see here, this is called Arabizi. It's a mix of Roman letters and numbers that represents Arabic alphabet. This riptide of dialogue could provide a framework for American Foreign Service officers to engage in this space. For all people that we met at discussions on women's rights, rape, terrorism, war, the meaning of ijtihad, which is the critical thought component of Islam, and interpreting the Quran. We encountered people with a full spectrum of views. We were not playing a game. this is an image from the virtual Hajj to Mecca. And obviously, the virtual Hajj to Mecca, which was created, by the way, by IslamOnline.net and has Muslim guides, it's obviously not the same in any way, shape, or form as taking a physical Mecca, which is a sacred journey shared by millions of people more each year. But because more people and more and more and more every year are taking the Hajj to Mecca, demonstrates a reason why people from the rest of the world should want to understand the symbolic value of the Hajj, which, taking it with a Muslim guide in the space, they gave us everything we needed and explained the entire process to us while we were participating. And at the same time, we conducted many in-depth interviews with young Egyptians about important subjects, Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. So at the same time where you're sharing creative experiences together, you are collecting intelligence and collecting information that can really facilitate unthinkable dimensions in cultural relations. Go to the next slide. Okay. Government can only act as a peacekeeping force if it understands that peace is not the absence of conflict. Conflict can really only lead to greater understanding if it doesn't escalate to violence. And the greater power lies in channeling human energy toward the greater good. So it's my belief that war is very expensive because, for many obvious reasons, the problem with war, which is often where we put the most collaborative creativity in our society and globally to create the most sophisticated machines, for example. I don't know how many of you have read P.W. Singer's book, Wired for War, but if you have, you'll know exactly what I mean. We have machines fighting wars for us now. The problem with putting those sort of resources into concept of war is that it requires battle in order to justify the continued expenditure, but so does the building of responsible technologies for the greater good, and it's a viable economic model, and so it has a solid chance of replacing a lot of the expenditure traditionally devoted toward battle. Governments are already exploring virtual worlds. This avatar belongs to a woman from the Azores. Her name is Ira Anatine. She traveled to real-world Iraq during the elections in 2009 with European parliamentarian Paulo Kasaka after convincing him to invest in the development of a presence in Second Life. And they broadcast their findings live from Second Life to a global audience. You can broadcast from Second Life to the internet. So we've done broadcasts, for example, with hundreds or thousands of people globally watching them, and it's like watching television, except that you can participate as we're doing here in live real-time chat. So let's see, almost done. This is a tool called that I commissioned for our space in Second Life called the Imagination Age. The Flickr getter, you can search on any tag in Flickr, and the images are projected in the space around your avatar, which really gives you a chance to see globally how people perceive different tags and different concepts. And it's my belief that in a peacekeeping capacity, the government should call upon scientists, artists, and journalists capable of creating data visualizations and environments capable of invoking change across language barriers. Above all else, by removing all possibility of physical danger and intimidation, the government can truly act as a peacekeeping force to create new understanding. And it is my strong belief that the nation that facilitates the rest of the world telling its story will be the greatest digital superpower. So now I will take some questions if you guys have them. Did we offer text transcripts of chats and broadcasts? Somebody is asking. And also someone asked, did the people? Here's the thing. I was a journalist for 8 years prior to starting my company, Dancing Inc. Productions, at the request of IBM in 2006. And so journalistic integrity and ethics are a huge focus. My collaborator and I are both also senior fellows at the Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs. And we work very hard to ensure that journalistic ethics is a major focus. However, we do believe that the digital culture is a culture of its own. So, for example, if you are a highly participatory avatar in Second Life and you use a name in Second Life, and you're spending 8 hours a day in a mosque community giving tours of Mecca, we will take the time to identify those mitigating factors so that people understand when they're reading our work or witnessing our work in some way, experiencing it, the various dimensions of identity and culture that we perceive.
Thanks. Oh, hi, Rita. Thanks.
Hi, Mark.
So a bunch of questions. I wanted to start off by asking something very general, and that is, I really like your question. Is it disrespectful to wear digital shoes in a virtual mask, and the notion of psychological, physical, and spiritual dimensions? But what occurs to me is I wonder how many State Department Foreign Service officers or other people like that represent the U.S. and are serving overseas, or people from other countries, of course, doing similar missions. How many of them are aware of these questions? How many do you think agencies are moving towards training people more to think about these questions? Where is that going?
Well, I know I see a lot more movement, for example, in the UK than I do in the US. I'm in Amsterdam right now. I just spent a week with the British Council working with them on designing a digital tool that would facilitate these kind of interactions. So I think in the US there's still a perception. Well, there's a couple things. One is that we're still talking about a basic split between war and peace uses, and it's harder to justify a budget for these sorts of uses. Is what I've perceived. However, I think there are a couple issues at work. One is the argument that, well, not that many people in the Middle East have access to, depending where you are in the Middle East, of course, have access to the sort of technology that would enable these high-level, sophisticated apps to run or platforms to run. However, there are a lot of people who have access, and they are key influencers, to use a term generally used. So, no, I don't think that these tools are being used nearly enough. With millions of people in these spaces, I think it is a responsibility of government to treat the digital culture not as something that takes place on external devices that is artificial or synthetic, but that as a creative, cost-collapsing manner of people connecting organically and understanding what happens when those organic developments take place and isolation is minimized is a key responsibility of government, in my opinion.
So related to that, I wanted to ask, and I think this will lead into a couple of the questions that came through. You were talking about second. I forgot to mention, if people in the audience are not familiar with the British Council, I encourage you to look them up, and they have a report, and it should be available, called Options for Influence, and it has to do with public diplomacy and to some degree technology in general. So that said, I wanted to ask you about other virtual worlds, because there are a lot of other virtual worlds besides Second Life, and they have entirely different environments and cultures and different kinds of people on them. And so what's going on with other virtual worlds? Why did you choose to use Second Life, and so on?
Well, Second Life is without a doubt the most culturally robust in that you can create an environment. You can co-create an environment because it's a user-created environment. So some environments, for example, you sign in and you choose from a list of avatars that are already created, and you, for example, Muslim Pal is one of the specifically for Muslims, and the content is pre-created. So you're sort of, it's like the difference between building a house from scratch or buying a house that's already built. If you buy a house that's already built, it's already there. That's great. You move right in. But it's a completely different dynamic, and I am far more interested in what people create when they imagine something collectively and then actually build a space in which to meet. So in that regard, Second Life has absolutely, there's no competition in that regard. However, I am also one of the other platforms that I frequently use. I'm the innovator in residence at IBM's Analytics Virtual Center in support of Smarter Planet, and we use Web.Alive for that. That's also called Project Chainsaw, and that's an incredibly easy platform to use. But again, I just go into my space that's pre-created. So for example, if you were holding a global summit and you were trying to see if a group of people in Egypt and a group of people in Tokyo and a group of people in New York were to co-create a spiritual space or cultural relations space, that would be more of a verbal exercise and something like Project Chainsaw, whereas in Second Life you could actually physically, virtually, build an environment together.
So you mentioned Carnegie and you mentioned IBM, and you have a number of sort of academic appointments, and your company is basically an R&D company. And so there's a question from Daniel Venditelli and another question from Margaret Heinlein about, who's your intended audience? So do you think of this mostly as like an academic research project into cultural behavior, things of that nature, or how do you think of it in your own words? Who's the intended audience for this kind of work?
The intended audience are business enterprise groups, not-for-profits, governments, universities around the world. We don't consider ourselves primarily academic. In fact, that's not, yes, part of what we do outwardly, the things that get the most attention have been academic in that way. But we work, for example, with Manpower on evolution of digital workforce development. Primarily, we are interested in the fact that there is a culture war that is perceived to be going on, and we think there's a cultural overlay over that culture war, which is the digital culture. The idea of creating a revenue stream, for example, from meaningful work is what will eventually draw people into the space for us to participate. And so our primary focus is on the creation of meaningful work.
Got it.
Through cultural understanding.
Got it. Sorry, yeah, you cut out. I thought you were done.
Yeah, I just realized that my computer was unplugged from the wall and that you're going to lose me, so I was multitasking.
Okay.
Sorry.
Adam Arthur asked, how much concern have you presented with over the, quote, radical element in Islam participating and even collaborating in virtual spaces?
I'm sorry, can you ask me that again? I lost you for a second.
Oh, sorry. So Adam Arthur asked, how much concern have you been presented with over the, quote, radical element in Islam participating and even collaborating in virtual spaces?
There's been quite a bit. I mean, we have encountered some extremism in the sense that, no, we have or anything like that. That's not, people take it so literally when they hear extremism. And there are so many different uses for the space. So because I believe that technology is a prism that we hold up to the imagination, I therefore believe that anything you want to create in these spaces, you can. With that said, we encountered extreme thought on both sides, and in fact witnessed discussions amid extreme conversations on both sides that were really, really, really interesting. We did take 80 pages out of the graphic novel that we created from this project, including some of the images that you saw here today. The person who had set fire to himself and waving the flag, for example, that was considered too incendiary. So you can see where there's a spectrum of what is considered to be extreme behavior. My belief, though, is that while extreme behavior is being undermined, I think, again, the single most powerful tool to undermine it is creating revenue streams around meaningful cultural development. And so I think that's where the economy is going. So this isn't just about, a kumbaya perspective on understanding other cultures, although that's always been my driving, force behind this, but also on bringing people together for work in these environments, creates revenue streams. So there's that. So extremists, there's a multi-pronged approach to that. You're going to find extremism anywhere you go if you're looking, but we have documented some of that as well. Yes.
Okay, so one more question in the interest of time, so we can end on time for everybody. Let's see, two slightly different angles. Daniel Venditelli was interested in
I lost you again for a second. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Maybe it's me. Sherry
I can hear you now.
Okay. Sherry Saperstein asked about virtual churches and whether or not that's a good way to begin sharing and understanding various religions and beliefs. And Daniel had asked about verifying the kinds of people you interact with and whether or not they're behaving the same way they are in real life. And so maybe we could just conclude on this sort of religious note and sharing information between cultures, and that's obviously kind of a contentious topic.
Yeah, actually, no. I mean, I have to say, I'll answer briefly. I worked on a major report in the Gulf Coast in 2006, post-Katrina, and when someone from IBM first mentioned Second Life to me, and so when I first went into Second Life, I thought, this is great. People are creating avatars. This is absolutely unbelievable. I can't believe this. And I was reading a book by Joseph Campbell called The Power of Myth, and so I went in, and they say that virtual environments are full of sex. I say, seek and you shall find. I searched on temples, mosques, temples. I mean, it depends what you search for is what you're going to find, is my point. And a Jewish synagogue that first night that I was in Second Life, and there were prayer services going on, and I met a woman who told me she was Muslim and that she had been curious her entire life about what goes on during prayer services in a synagogue, and I was fascinated by the implications of being able to understand another culture. She felt that she would be persecuted or make people uncomfortable if she ever went to a physical synagogue. And so I think, there's all sorts of demographics of people exploring virtual worlds, just as there are all sorts of demographics of people in the physical world. And the demographic with which I frequently overlap, the most is people who are interested in finding something authentic to express about themselves. I always say there are a lot of people who are really thrilled because they can be a vampire now. Those are not the people we're talking about here. We're talking about people who are genuinely curious about humanizing the other. And so, yes, these spaces, there are amazing churches and cathedrals and mosques and temples and synagogues, including in the ancient Mesopotamia area that I showed you earlier. There are temples to the goddess Inanna. I mean, many people don't realize that Iraq used to be, a goddess temple territory. So when you go back in history, virtual worlds almost become like time travel. You can see ancient Iraq and then juxtapose with present-day Iraq and, understand the history. When I was in third grade, we used to build, shoebox dioramas. Now you can take kids into a virtual ancient Mesopotamia. So
right.
I think it's powerful.
So I don't have the name in front of me, but someone wanted to know if your graphic novel was available. So maybe if there's information, you could put that in the chat room.
Yep, I put a link to the project itself. Here, I'll drop that again for you guys. And I believe there's a link on there that will take you to the graphic novel. Yeah, you can click on and get the graphic novel. You can also, we're selling it at cost, or you can go, let me just call up a link to my entire pages up on Flickr so that people could get it for free.
That's terrific, Rita. Thanks for doing that, and thanks very much for calling in today all the way from Amsterdam.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to let me know. Here, let me give you guys the Flickr. So
Great.
It's a little harder to see on Flickr. You have to enlarge the images when you do. Put it on slideshow. You guys can check it out.
Right. Thanks, Rita.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
And I want to thank everyone, all of our speakers, Merrick, Jeff, Melissa, Rita, Peter, and Michelle. And thank everyone for tuning in. It seems like we had well over 200 people during the entire conference. I know we have a lot of people that are outside the United States. We had a lot of people that asked a lot of great questions. And a lot of this wouldn't have been possible without you. So thanks so much for tuning in. We look forward to getting some of your feedback, and it's possible we'll do another one of these if there's an appetite for it. I also want to thank Microsoft, our program sponsor, for helping us make this possible. And you can learn more about how you can use technology that you already own to ready your enterprise for Government 2.0 if you go to microsoftgovready.com. Laurel?
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mark. It was a great day. If you would just please fill out your event survey as you leave the chat room, that will help us greatly as we plan these events in the future. And we hope to see you actually in D.C. at our Gov 2.0 Expo in May. The call for proposals is still open until January 6th. So if you have a great idea or if you've been inspired by something you heard today, please send in a proposal. We'd love to hear what everyone is doing from around the world, as well as just down the street. So have a fantastic day, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.